Early morning, November 22, 1718. In Ocracoke Inlet, off the coast of North Carolina, the sea surface was still covered in a thin layer of mist. The water was calm as a gray sheet of glass. Amidst that mist was the shadow of a pitch-black wooden sailing ship with high masts, sails furled, and ropes swaying gently with each rhythm of the waves. That was the Adventure, the temporary shelter of one of the names that made the entire Atlantic terrified, Blackbeard. On the deck, a few oil lamps flickered, casting dim light on tanned faces, shaggy beards, coarse fabric shirts, long coats, and wide leather belts with flintlock pistols and daggers stuck all around their bodies. The pirates were tired after many weeks of hunting prey. Some were sleeping leaning against wooden barrels, others sat whittling knives in silence. In the middle of the deck stood a man of large stature, broad shoulders, with a thick black beard braided into strands hanging down to his chest. In battles, he often stuck slow-burning fuses around his hat, letting white smoke rise like a demonic halo. That man, Edward Teach, or as the whole world called him, by a simpler but much more terrifying name, Blackbeard. This morning, Ocracoke Inlet seemed peaceful. The wind was light. The smell of pine resin and damp wood wafted around the ship. But behind the mist far away, other sails were silently approaching. Not merchant ships, nor fellow pirates. Those were two small sloops of the Royal Navy, with wooden hulls painted white, the British flag fluttering at the top of the mast. On deck were soldiers wearing dark blue coats and tricorn hats, arms cradling muskets. With polished sword blades at their sides, they received orders with only a single objective: capture Blackbeard alive or kill him. In the next few hours, in this shallow inlet, amidst rudimentary wooden sailing ships, black cast-iron cannons, archaic pistols, and cold sword blades, the final showdown between the pirate legend and the Royal Navy would take place, and only one side could leave Ocracoke alive. To understand why, on that misty morning at Ocracoke, the entire British Royal Navy would focus its strength on hunting down a single man, we must turn back time to a few years earlier, to the very period people still call the Golden Age of Piracy. In the early 18th century, wars between European empires had temporarily subsided. Thousands of sailors and marines who had served on privateer ships were suddenly disbanded, no wages, no battle lines. On the docks along the Atlantic, from England and France to the colonies in the New World, were countless tanned faces, clothes tattered and worn, hands still calloused from ropes and muskets, yet no shipowner needed them anymore. Meanwhile, merchant routes carrying sugar, tobacco, fabrics, and silver were busier than ever, silently crossing seas devoid of warship flags. Amidst that void, piracy was not naturally born, but grew like weeds from the very chaotic soil of the era. Many who were once legitimate sailors now chose a path of living by the blade and the gun barrel. They had no steel ships, no steam engines, or sophisticated machinery. What they had were only wooden sailing ships, hulls sheathed in thick planks, masts bound by rough hemp ropes, cannons of black cast-iron firing hand-packed gunpowder, and flintlock muskets that had to be loaded bullet by bullet, dose by dose. Everything on deck, from the wooden helm and gears to hand-drawn maps scorched by embers, was rudimentary, heavy, and depended entirely on human strength, the wind, and seafaring experience. In that picture, a name began to rise, initially just an ordinary captain, then becoming a legend that made both the Caribbean and the East Coast of America wary. His real name was Edward Teach, but very few bothered to remember that name. Most only referred to him by a simple and cold nickname, Blackbeard. He was not the inventor of piracy, nor was he the only captain who dared to attack merchant ships. What made him different lay in how he knew to use human fear as a weapon. Blackbeard had no armor, no modern equipment. He only had a thick black beard, braided into many strands reaching his chest, and a habit of tucking slow-burning fuses under his hat during combat. The fuses slowly released white smoke, curling around his head and face. In that smoke, his eyes appeared dim, his whiskers seeming to smolder, creating an image half man, half demon on the wooden deck. When the pirate ship closed in, Black cannons on the side roared, gunpowder smoke mixing with smoke from the fuses around the captain's head, the shouts of sailors echoing. For many merchant sailors, the moment they saw that black-bearded ghost was also the moment their will to resist began to crumble. During his most rampant years, Blackbeard commanded a captured ship he named Queen Anne's Revenge. That ship was just wood, canvas sails and ropes like any other. But on deck, he equipped more cannons, stocked full of flintlock pistols, daggers, and cutlasses. His crew was a gathering of all types, former merchant sailors, deserters, runaway criminals. They ate from wooden bowls, slept in hammocks hung between rickety ship frames, filling their lungs every day with the smell of sea salt, pine tar, and gunpowder smoke clinging to their clothes. With that ship, Blackbeard once blockaded the port of Charleston, stopping ships, taking hostages, demanding ransom and medicine. He was both a criminal and a symbol of an era where the law of the sea sometimes could not reach. Merchants, ship owners, and colonial authorities along the coast gradually realized if Blackbeard was allowed to continue, every voyage out to sea would be like a gamble with death. Under pressure from merchants and colonial governments, the Kingdom of Great Britain was forced to act more firmly. They issued a pardon for pirates who surrendered, offering a chance to return to a lawful life for those willing to lay down arms. On paper, Blackbeard at one point accepted that pardon, went ashore, and temporarily washed his hands of the sword on the coast of North Carolina. But many rumors suggested he was still secretly trading, making under-the-table deals with some local officials, exchanging loot for a blind eye. In his role as the governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood viewed those rumors as a slap to his prestige. Spotswood understood that if he let a notorious pirate like Blackbeard live comfortably right near the colonial border, merchants would not trust the government, and his reputation with the royal crown would also be damaged. However, directly attacking someone sheltering in territory under another colony's jurisdiction was a sensitive matter. Spotswood decided to do it anyway, and he chose to do it in silence. He secretly assigned the mission to a young officer, Lieutenant Maynard of the Royal Navy, to lead a small force out to sea to hunt Blackbeard without officially notifying North Carolina. The force in Maynard's hands was not a mighty fleet. He was only given 2 small sloops, wooden hulls, single masts, decent speed, easy to maneuver in shallow waters. On board were a few dozen sailors and naval soldiers, men wearing thick dark blue coats. Underneath were white shirts yellowed by sea salt, hands in rough gloves, feet in old leather shoes. They were equipped with muskets loaded by hand, single-barrel pistols stuffed with powder from the muzzle, straight swords, and daggers. The number of cannons on the ships was small and light, incomparable to large warships. Everything relied on tactics, on the ability to close in and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Nights before weighing anchor, in the cramped hold, Maynard's soldiers were seen sitting leaning against wooden barrels, using whetstones to sharpen their blades. Some carefully dismantled muskets to wipe every part, brushing off the thin layer of salt clinging to the metal after every sea trip. On deck, ropes were coiled neatly, sails patched at tiers with rough fabric. Everything was simple, rigid, without the shadow of shiny metal or complex machinery. Only wood, cloth, rope, and the familiar smell of pine tar. When Maynard's 2 ships left port, they drifted silently on the gray sea surface, murky white sails full of wind, wooden helms creaking with every change of direction. In the hands of the young lieutenant was a hand-drawn map, a few scraps of information about where Blackbeard usually anchored, and a concise order: capture alive or destroy. No radio, no radar. Everything relied on the eyes, ears, and experience of seafarers on rudimentary wooden ships. On the other side, Blackbeard had the advantage of being familiar with every creek, every sandbar around the Ocracoke area. He had fame, an experienced crew, and still believed that in shallow waters, British Navy ships would hardly dare to risk it. But right at that moment, when both sides, one a notorious pirate, the other a small colonial force, believed they had a reason to win, the wheels of history were silently turning toward the final touch point at Ocracoke Inlet, where every calculation, every ambition, and every mistake would meet on that seemingly harmless calm water. Morning at Ocracoke Inlet lingered in a soft gray hue. The sun had risen, but its light was held back by the thin mist on the calm sea surface. Lieutenant Robert Maynard's 2 wooden sloops advanced slowly in the damp, cold air, their murky white sails sagging slightly due to the lack of wind, ropes creaking softly every time the hull rocked gently on the waves. On deck, British naval soldiers stood still, hands gripping muskets tightly, eyes fixed on the hazy water ahead. No one spoke loudly, only the sound of footsteps on deck planks and water lapping steadily against the hull. In the small command cabin at the stern, Maynard looked down at a hand-drawn map spread on a wooden barrel. Black ink lines indicated creeks, sandbanks, and shallow areas around Ocracoke. He looked up, peering through the small window, seeing only low bands of white mist clinging to the water and the blurry silhouette of the low tree line in the distance. Intelligence stated that Blackbeard often anchored his ship in a secluded shallow inlet with little traffic. Today, his mission was to take these 2 small ships deep into that area where large warships could hardly enter. On Blackbeard's ship, the Adventure, the morning began quite differently. A sailor climbed up the rigging, hands gripping each rope ladder rung, eyes straining to see through the mist. At first, he only saw patches of sandy shore and a few clumps of low trees. Then, further away, through a gap in the mist layer, he recognized other masts rising up. Their sails were not large, but the way they were rigged, the color of the fabric, and the flag at the masthead were enough for him to understand. Those were not merchant ships. When he clearly saw the British flag flying in the light breeze, he immediately climbed down to alert the deck. On the Adventure, the atmosphere changed almost instantly. Those repairing ropes, patching sails, or drinking a morning sip of rum hurriedly stood up. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed on the deck planks, the sound of ropes being pulled, the sound of weapons clinking against each other. Blackbeard stepped out onto the deck, a tall figure, his thick black beard hanging down to his chest, hair tied neatly behind his neck. He wore a thick dark coat, pistols, and a dagger at his side. With just a glance, he knew who was facing him. The hull shape, the flag, and the crew on deck gave him the answer. The Royal Navy had found his hiding place. He did not choose to stand still and wait to be surrounded. He ordered the anchor raised, sails unfurled, and the ship to move. The Adventure slowly left its anchorage, heading toward the channel leading to open water. Blackbeard trusted his experience in shallow waters. He had navigated these creeks many times, knew by heart where it was deep, where it was easy to run aground, and believed that was an advantage military ships could hardly match. On the opposite side, Maynard had also seen the pirate ship. Through a rudimentary spyglass, he saw a low, dark wooden hull, the deck beginning to bustle. He knew this was the target that had been sought for months. He ordered the 2 small ships to advance faster, keeping a distance just enough to observe, just enough not to rush too deep into the sandy area before understanding the situation. Cannons were prepared, muskets loaded, but he understood that this battle would not only take place from afar. As the distance between the 2 sides narrowed, the mist thinned, and details on the pirate deck became clearer. Tanned faces, cloth caps, rough coats, heavy belts. The light breeze carried the smell of pine tar from the wooden hull, and somewhere the faint smell of gunpowder lingering from previous shooting practices. Maynard ordered the British flag raised higher as an affirmation of royal authority over these waters. When the distance was close enough for a voice to carry over the water, one of the British ships fired a warning shot into the sky. The explosion echoed across the inlet, startling a flock of seabirds. An officer used a wooden megaphone to call over, demanding Blackbeard's ship stop and lower its sails. Procedural words rang back and forth between the 2 sides, but both Blackbeard and Maynard understood that these were just formal steps. The real decision would be made by action. After brief replies, the air was silent for a moment. Then Blackbeard ordered a course adjustment, trying to utilize every stretch of water he deemed safe. But just as the Adventure glided over a section that was too shallow, the hull suddenly jerked violently. A sound from the bottom reverberated up to the deck as the keel hit sand. The ship halted, swaying very gently with the waves. He'd gone too close to the shallows. Maynard noticed the pirate ship suddenly slow down. He guessed what had happened. However, he himself was not entirely safe. One of his 2 ships, while trying to close in, also touched bottom, causing sailors to shout a warning. Maynard was forced to order reduced sail, maintaining the best possible position, avoiding letting his ship run aground deeper. In a not-so-large body of water, both the pursuer and the pursued were limited by the very layer of fine sand at the bottom. At that distance, cannons became the first voice. Blackbeard did not want to let the opponent take the initiative. He ordered the cannons rotated, aiming straight at one of Maynard's ships. Black cast-iron cannons were pulled into position, gunpowder rammed tight. When the order was shouted, the first explosions resounded, white smoke puffing out from the side of the Adventure, spreading over the damp, cold water surface. Cannonballs whistled through the air, some fell into the water, creating high columns of spray. Some others hit the wooden hull of the British side, breaking planks, sending wood splinters flying. Soldiers on Maynard's deck had to duck, find cover. A few were knocked from their positions, unable to continue fighting. Gunpowder smoke lingered in the air, obscuring part of the view. Maynard understood very clearly. If the battle was allowed to drag on at cannon range, the result would be unpredictable. His ships had fewer cannons, hulls were lighter, easily suffering heavy impact when hit by multiple consecutive cannon volleys. He had men return fire, but did not focus full force on that. The volleys from his side aimed to keep pressure, making the pirates wary, while he silently prepared another plan. He ordered sailors to throw unnecessary heavy objects into the sea to lighten the ship, hoping to help the ship float a bit higher, reducing the risk of running aground deep. More importantly, he required most of the soldiers and sailors still fit to fight to withdraw to the hold below deck. The deck needed to become sparse of people, as if the ship had been beaten to exhaustion, and only a few people remained to man the helm. In a short time, the scene on Maynard's deck changed. The wounded were moved away. Healthier ones also gradually disappeared down the hatches. On deck, only a few silhouettes remained at the ship control position. From the Adventure looking over, the British ship suddenly became silent and empty. This could easily lead to a deduction. The recent cannon volley had caused the opponent to suffer greater losses than reality, Blackbeard observed intently. When the smoke thinned, he saw the British deck was no longer as bustling as initially. The intuition of someone who had attacked merchant ships many times told him that this was a favorable time to close in. If keeping distance, his grounded ship would be at a disadvantage. If pulling closer, using experience in boarding and close quarters combat, he believed he could still turn the tide. He ordered preparation for a raid. Grappling hooks were brought out, checked again. A group of pirates was chosen to lead, all people accustomed to climbing onto other ships amidst smoke and explosions. They tightened their belts, checked pistols, swords, daggers, then lined up in groups against the ship's rail. Blackbeard stood among them, still maintaining a defiantly calm demeanor. When the two ships were close enough, grappling hooks were thrown over. Latching onto the railing and mast of the British ship, sailors on both sides pulled the ropes, hulls rubbing against each other, emitting the sound of grinding wood. Some pirates chose to jump straight over, feet touching down on the opponent's deck amidst loud shouts to keep up morale. They expected to see a chaotic deck full of panicked people, but what appeared was a space emptier than they imagined, with only a few figures at the stern. A very short silence appeared. A few people in the vanguard group sensed something unusual, but the inertia of years at sea did not allow them to stop. They split up, rushing toward the front and rear of the deck, wanting to quickly seize positions as they had done with countless other ships. Just then, the signal Maynard was waiting for was given. From the hatches leading to the hold, British naval soldiers suddenly swarmed up. They had prepared muskets, standing waiting in the dark below deck, just waiting for the moment the opponent came close enough. When the signal sounded, they rushed out, forming groups, taking key positions. The first volleys fired at short range, catching those on deck by surprise. White smoke flared up again, but this time from Maynard's side. The space on deck immediately fell into chaos. Pirates, just from a position of active attack, were forced to turn to deal with opponents appearing from many directions. Naval soldiers kept a tighter formation, groups moving on command, firing while advancing, utilizing the prepared advantage. Shouts of command echoed on the deck, interspersed among the mixed sounds of guns, footsteps, and the clashing of weapons. In that setting, Blackbeard still stood out clearly, not because of gruesome details, but because of his calmness in a rapidly turning situation. He tried to rally his subordinates, signaling them to hold position, not to be separated. He moved on the deck both to avoid bullet paths and to find an opportunity to approach the commander on the opposite side. As for Maynard, near the stern, he had also stepped out, hand holding sword and gun, observing where the critical point of the battle was. The distance between them did not narrow by a single duel, as in stories embroidered later, but by a series of short moments as the two sides moved through the crowd. But the important thing was, toward the end, it was clear the initiative on deck no longer lay in the hands of the pirates as when they had just jumped over. What Maynard bet on, calmness, discipline, and the empty deck trap, gradually took effect. Those following Blackbeard, when looking around and seeing the number of people still holding combat positions dwindling day by day, began to have to choose. Some still tried to hold out, fighting to the end. Others sought to retreat toward the side of their ship. In the thinning smoke, the image of a small group of pirates trying to hold out on the opponent's deck, surrounding their leader, became the final highlight of the battle. Then, at a certain point, the noisy battle also gradually subsided. Explosions became sporadic, then fell silent completely. On the deck, those still standing breathed heavily, looking around to be sure no unexpected danger remained. Blackbeard, who had for many years mastered encounters at sea, in the end did not leave Ocracoke as he had thought. The showdown that both sides believed they had a reason to win closed right on the wooden planks of two ships stuck in shallow water.
All right, everyone.
On the sea surface, Ocracoke Inlet gradually returned to its outward quiet appearance. But beneath that calm wave layer, everything had changed. From the moment the first grappling hooks flew over connecting the two ships until the last gunshot fell silent, a chapter of the pirate era had been pushed to its conclusion right here on a patch of sea seemingly very small compared to the vast Atlantic Ocean. When the last gunshot fell completely silent on Ocracoke Inlet, what remained was not just a scorched deck, a few black cast-iron cannons, and wooden hulls stuck on the sand. Behind the dissipating gunpowder smoke, a silent question emerged. Why did a seasoned pirate like Blackbeard, who had mastered so many hunting trips at sea, fail against two small ships of a naval lieutenant who was not yet a very famous figure in history books like Robert Maynard? The battle that morning, if looked at closely, was not just a hand-to-hand contest between two men, but a collision between two views of the sea, of tactics, and of fear. For many years, Blackbeard's strongest weapon was not just cannons, pistols, or blades. What truly made his reputation was his ability to sow fear in opponents before they could fire the first shot. The image of a tall captain with a braided beard hanging down to his chest, white smoke rising around his head, eyes flashing in gunpowder smoke on a pitch-black wooden sailing ship overflowing with weapons, was enough for many merchant sailors to think of surrendering instead of resisting to the end. He was accustomed to using cannons to panic the opponent, then immediately closing in, sending men to jump onto the other deck, resolving the rest by hand-to-hand combat. That was a style of fighting fast, fighting based on shock and psychology, rarely dragging on into a war of attrition. But at Ocracoke, that psychological advantage was reversed. Maynard, with the eye of a naval officer, did not try to defeat Blackbeard with the very thing pirates were best at. He did not rush into a cannon duel knowing he had fewer cannons, nor did he try to keep the deck full of people to show strength. On the contrary, he accepted letting the deck look broken, accepted letting the opponent think he had caused serious damage. He used the silence on deck, used the empty space as a trap, pulling Blackbeard into exactly the type of situation he often thought was home turf, raiding a ship that seemed exhausted. Precisely at the moment the pirate felt most familiar and confident, Maynard's plan truly began. The terrain of Ocracoke Inlet was also an important factor. Shallow water, fine sandy bottom, narrow channels between sandbars were places where, in theory, people familiar with the waters would have a distinct advantage. Blackbeard understood that and relied on it. He believed that British Navy ships, though small, still risked running aground if they went too deep. But that very belief led him to push his ship to the limit until the keel touched sand. In naval warfare, in the age of wooden sailing ships, running aground in the wrong place at the wrong time was no different from tying one's own hands before a duel. And that morning, both sides had to pay a price because of the sand. The difference was in how they reacted after being held back. Maynard did not try to deny the reality that he was at a disadvantage. He did not hide the damage, nor did he order his men to stand still waiting for the next cannon volley. He accepted abandoning the image of a gallant warship for a few minutes to turn it into a ship that seemed to have collapsed with only a few lonely figures on deck. That temporary loss of face was the price he paid to buy a single opportunity, forcing Blackbeard to leave his relatively safe gunship position, forcing him to jump into a space Maynard had prepared, where the discipline and organization of naval soldiers were maximized at close range. If looking from above, we would see a clear contrast. On this side was the pirate ship, where each person was an experienced individual, seasoned, accustomed to fighting by instinct and in chaos. On the other side was the naval ship, where each soldier was taught how to hold ranks, wait for orders, load, fire, and move in formation. In the blinding white smoke on deck, no one had time to analyze those things. But that very difference caused the disciplined chaos of the British soldiers to prevail over the pure chaos of the pirates at the decisive moment. Later, when people retold stories about Blackbeard, many added mystical details, buried treasures, curses, ghosts. But behind the layer of legendary mist, there was still a flesh and blood human, a captain who knew how to calculate, knew how to choose targets, knew when to threaten, when to negotiate. He also once, at least according to some records, chose to avoid unnecessary losses if the opponent accepted handing over goods. That does not turn him into a hero, but reminds us that he was not a mythical character born only to destroy. He was a product of an era of the sea full of power vacuums, where the law on paper sometimes could not catch up with sailing ships running by wind. The showdown at Ocracoke, therefore, did not just close the story of an individual. It marked a change in how empires viewed the problem of piracy. Instead of just considering them scattered criminal groups, they began to understand that to protect maritime routes, they had to use planned campaigns, using both information and wit, not just firing more cannons. And for seafarers later on, the story of Blackbeard and Maynard became a reminder that on that seemingly endless water surface, not always is the louder scream, the scarier image, or the bigger cannon the deciding factor. Sometimes it is calmness, the ability to read the situation, and accepting to sacrifice outward appearance to seize a single opportunity that is what delineates the boundary between a legend who continues to sail and a legend who stops forever at the bottom of a small inlet. When Maynard's ship left Ocracoke Inlet, dragging along pirate prisoners and the final traces of Blackbeard, the sea surface gradually closed its last ripples, as if nothing special had just happened. But for those who lived by the breath of the sea, both on the east coast of the New World and across the Atlantic, that morning was a dividing line. Before that, the name Blackbeard was a whisper in taverns, a warning shouted on merchant decks, a black shadow hastily drawn on old maps. After that, that name became a story retold, embroidered, added with not a few mysterious details, but also framed in the past. A chapter of the pirate era was closed not by solemn declarations, but by a brief battle in a small bay full of sand and mist. For merchants, ship owners, and the British colonial administration, the destruction of Blackbeard was a clear message. The Navy and the government were ready to proactively use force to protect maritime routes. It created a greater sense of peace of mind for cargo ships leaving port, stacking on deck however many wooden crates containing sugar, coffee, tobacco, and fabrics. But at the same time, it also reminded them that to obtain that sense of safety, there were people who had to pay the price with their lives on wooden decks, where there was no armor, no thick steel plating, only a few planks, a few ropes, and a flag as the last hold of honor. For the naval soldiers who participated in the battle that day, victory was not entirely a complete joy. They returned with proof that the mission was accomplished, with stories about facing directly one of the most notorious pirates of the era. But they also carried memories of that misty morning, the sound of cannons shaking the whole ship hull, the sound of muskets exploding harshly at close range, the sound of wooden planks shattering, the sound of men falling without finishing a sentence. In every victory on paper, There's always a list of smaller names, people not recorded in history books, but who were the ones directly shouldering the weight of that moment on their own shoulders. As for Blackbeard, the story did not stop at Ocracoke Inlet. After he fell, his image began another journey, not on the sea surface, but in human imagination. Through many generations, people added details about buried treasures, about curses, about the ghost of Blackbeard wandering in the dark night on a ship no longer belonging to this world. Those stories sound thrilling, but sometimes unintentionally obscure the real person, a captain born in a chaotic era, using fear as a weapon, choosing a path outside the law, and finally having to pay the full price for that choice. Looking back at the showdown at Ocracoke from a distance of over 300 years, we can choose many ways to evaluate it. Some will consider it an inevitable victory of order over chaos, of law over piracy. Others see in Blackbeard the distorted image of an era throwing men out to sea, then leaving them to find their own way to survive amidst storms, guns, and greed. The question raised is, if born in another circumstance, with another profession, would Edward Teach have become the Blackbeard we know today? Or would he just be a faint name in a merchant ship registry? And if put in reverse, supposing that morning, it wasn't Maynard who won, but Blackbeard who broke the siege, escaping from Ocracoke once more, would history be much different, or just simply prolong a few more years of panic at sea before another person, another fleet, repeated what happened in this shallow bay? In your opinion, is the Battle of Ocracoke a story about a criminal being punished, or is it a mirror reflecting clearly the price that both sides, pirates and navy, individuals and the state, had to pay for letting the ocean become a battlefield lasting for many generations? You can share your thoughts in the comments section. Do you see Blackbeard as a symbol of crime or an extreme product of the times? And what do you think truly ended the pirate era? Battles like at Ocracoke, or the silent changes in how humans manage the sea and the law on maritime routes?